Hi there, welcome back to another decision-making tutorial where we're going to discuss one of the Venn diagram question types. So this one's going to be focusing on the Venn to text style where the answer options are all statements. So slightly different from when the answer options ask you how many more, and that bit is in another tutorial. So in this lesson, we're going to aim to cover a few really important things. We're going to go over the very basics of Venn diagram theory. We're going to tackle one of the common question types that can come up in this section. And then equally, we're going to plop in the mistakes that we really don't want to be making because they're the common mistakes with Venn diagrams that we know we can avoid. So how are these questions actually structured then? So they give you a Venn diagram, which may or may not be complete because sometimes people just forget halfway through to complete it. Then they ask you to pick a correct answer out of a series of statements. So it can either be which statement is true or which statement is false. So in order to do that, you're going to need to do some calculations, work out how to read that Venn diagram in order to appraise each of those statements in turn. So when we think of all the Venn diagram question types available, we've got 6 available, and these ones are actually the most common. About 35% of all Venn diagram questions that come up in decision making are of this question type. So it's incredibly important that you are able to master this type in particular. So one of the most important things when we're answering any question in the Ucat is understanding how we should deal with that question stem. With these types of questions, you're wanting to spend more time on reading the question statements and only refer to the stem when you need to. So when you find a bit of information that you want to find out, read the statement and then move across to the stem. There's no harm in having a quick glance in the stem to see what it's all about, but make sure you spend most of your time focusing on those answer statements. So before we begin looking at any questions in depth, we're just going to cover some of the basic Venn diagram theory. So this, even surprising so, it is actually still a Venn diagram. In fact, most of the questions that are in decision making don't use circles because circles are boring. Why be a circle when you can be an arrow? So these questions tend to have whimsical shapes as your sort of circles almost, and they'll have that appropriate key alongside it to tell you what each of those mean. So of course, when we're reading the Venn diagram, we need to understand what those overlaps mean. So anywhere that 2 shapes overlap means that number falls into both of those categories. So this overlap here would represent the people that are both watching sports live and watching TV. So that's an overlap between 2 categories, but we can equally have an overlap between 3 categories. So this overlap here shows people who are watching TV, drinking alcohol, and wearing white jeans, aka me every Sunday. So when we're thinking of the numbers that are lying outside of that Venn diagram, even if they're outside, they're still incredibly important, as what they tell us is the amount of people who don't fall into any of those categories. And that makes up our total sample population. So without those 11 people, we don't know how many people have been asked or what percentage of the total, like wearing white jeans, for example. So that number is still incredibly important for us to gather. And if we're not given it, it's often easy to figure it out based on a bit of information you've been given at the start of the question. So the next thing we want to do is look at the question and analyse what it's actually asking you. So in this case, we've been asked for which is true. Very important that we do read that, as it's so easy to miss if it's asking which statement is false, and then you get yourself all in a kerfuffle and end up doing far more work than you need to. So with this question, we're going to be looking for a true statement. So we're going to have 4 statements here, and I want to look for the easiest to begin with. So we're going to narrow down our options. To do this, we sort of just look at which answer options need the most categories. I'm really wanting ones that have the fewest number of categories to start with, as that's going to be the easiest ones for me to find in this Venn diagram. So I think option B for me is the easiest to spot here. So what I'm going to do is look for TV. So TV is here represented by that triangle. So everything in that triangle, even if it's in an overlap, are people who watch TV. So we need to count up how many are in there. And some quick mental maths in my head, I sort of do the 4 plus 6 is 10, plus the other 10 is 20, 27, 5, 32. Okay, we're already above that 27. So we know this statement must be false. So we can thankfully rule this one straight out. So if you look at our 3 remaining statements, both A and C only refer to 2 categories, whereas D refers to 3 different categories. So we're going to be, again, going for what one is simple. So we're probably just going to start with A by convention of, the alphabet. So when we look at what A is actually asking us, we're wanting the people who watch sport live and the people who wear white jeans, which is represented by the heart and that arrowhead. Again, we're just going to be totaling up how many is in with each of them. So the people who watch sport live is going to be 17, and the people who wear white jeans is going to be that 4 plus 6 is 10, 3, 5, 8, 18. So Grant, 17 watch sport live, 18 wear white jeans. Wonderful, we have a difference of 1. But make sure not to get caught out here. What way round is that difference? So 1 less person watches sport live than wears white jeans, which is absolutely not what this statement says. It'd be very, very easy to get caught off guard with this one. So make sure you fully read the statement, and if you do, we know that this one has to be false as well. So we're going to just go into statement C now, because it's going to be the next easiest. So we're wanting people that wear white jeans and people who drink alcohol. So these ones are, again, we're going to be looking at that arrow. So we already remember that there's 18 people in that lot there. And then we're wanting the people who watch, who drink alcohol, which is that rectangle. So we could add up everything in that rectangle, but we're going to be doing needless maths there. So what I could look at this as is ignoring this overlap here. So this little bit in the middle represents people who are both drinking alcohol and wearing white jeans. So if we don't include those in either side of our calculation, in either of our totals, there's no loss to either of them because they're both going to decrease by that 7. So let's just add up what's not there. So we've got for drinking alcohol, we've got 9, and for wearing white jeans, we've got 11. So that's our difference of 2. So absolutely, we can confirm that C is going to be our correct statement here. So let's have a look at that statement D there. So we're going to go to that first bit of the statement, so people that only watch sport live. So we look at that heart shape, but bear in mind that that 5 that's going on there, that overlap 5, is not just people that only watch sport live, they also watch TV. So we're going to have to knock those off. So the people who only watch sport is going to be just that number 12 we have going on there. Next, we're going to need that people who either wear white jeans, only wear white jeans, or only watch TV. So again, we're going for the single sections that are not within any overlaps. So people that only watch TV is going to be 10, and the people that only wear white jeans is 5. So it's going to be 15 there in comparison to that 12. So again, you can see that 12 in no world is bigger than 15. So we're not going to be saying that one's true, and we can also rule out D in this case. So the correct answer for this one overall will be C. So well done if you managed to get that one. So we've got to be very careful when we're counting overlapping regions, as it's so easy to count the same number twice and then get a total that's nowhere near what we need. So be conscious of overlaps and really understand what they mean. So an overlapping region is a sort of a person or a group of people that fall into 2 categories. So if you've counted them within one category and you're wanting to add on another category, don't recount that overlap. So just be extra careful of overlapping segments. Now, if you remember what I said earlier, that sometimes people are just too lazy to draw the entire Venn diagram, sometimes they're even lazier and don't draw a key for us. So the key is the bit of that table that tells us what each of these shapes mean. You'll be given some way to figure it out, but we don't always have that nice, understandable visual key. So if you don't have one, you're going to have to put the work in yourself and create yourself a key. So if you would like to have a go of this question, just pause the video now and give it a shot. If not, stay tuned and we're just going to go over the example in just a moment. So with this one, you can pretty quickly see that we are not given a key at all. We're given what each of the things represent, but in words, and we don't want to read. So let's just change that into some sort of Venn diagram key. So if we have a look at what this question is actually asking us, all of the answer options are requiring us to know some sort of comparison between different things. So let's just look at what one we're not going to need a massive comparison for. The thing that I'm immediately brought to is answer option C here, because it refers to male CEOs and female CEOs. Now, unless I am completely blind, I cannot see anything on male CEOs in this diagram. So we're going to just say girl power on this one and get rid of answer option C because we don't have the data needed to compare to male CEOs. So we can score that one out immediately. So the next one that we're going to go with is probably just working by convention at this point. All three of the other options are going to need some sort of maths involved. So let's just start up at A. So we're being asked for, amongst the organisation have fewer than 5,000 staff, 20% have a female CEO. So our initial thought is, well, we have the triangle representing 5,000 staff. But be careful here, because that triangle represents over 5,000 staff. We're wanting fewer. So anything that's not within that triangle must have fewer than 5,000 staff. So we're going to need to be taking everything else going on here. And we're thinking 20% of them have female CEOs. Even by inspection, I know that that's not true. Because if you look at how many of those numbers that are now shaded in purple lie within that middle rectangle, a lot, more than 20%. That's going to be far over our total. So I can immediately just score that one out by inspection without really doing any sums here. So moving on to answer option B, we're going to be looking for the organisations that do pro bono work. So we know that's represented by our circle. And we're saying the majority of them are equity firms. Now we have in our key that is a pentagon. So let's look for the overlap between the pentagon and the circle. And again, that is not the majority. That is a tiny proportion of what we've got going on here. Even if we look at 6, 4 and 3 is 13. And already with that 12 and other numbers going on, we're going to be above that. So no, the majority do not. The majority of pro bono works are not equity firms. So again, we can actually rule out C for this one. So by convention, we would actually know that D must be true. So if we were running out of time, we would absolutely just select D and move on. But just for fullness, let's go through D and why it would be correct. So D is asking for the organisations who have a female CEO. So we're going to take that rectangle in the middle. And the number that do not do pro bono work versus the number that do. So we're going to be looking for that overlap of that circle. So the bit where that circle intersects with our rectangle female CEOs is going to be the number that do pro bono work. And the number out with that is going to be the number that do not. So we just have to add them up and make sure those are equal. So the numbers in our circle there, that's also in our rectangle. So we're just going to do 4, 3, 2 and 12. So just add that up in your heads, 21. And then that 15, 4 and 2. Eureka, also 21. So we do know that this one is absolutely true. So even though we would have probably picked it because we ruled out the others, we can confirm it with the maths as well and say that D is 100% the correct answer here. It's quite a long-winded one, quite a lot to do in that one, but hopefully you can see if we break it down into stages, it is a very manageable question. So I cannot stress enough, do not do more work than you are needed to do. Just start with the one that has the fewest categories. If it's wrong, it's fine, you've easily knocked it out. If it's correct, golden, move on to the next question. Don't spend time that you're not needed to. So always start with the question that's the statement that is easiest for you to determine if it's true or false. So we're going to have another question going on here. Again, if you'd like to have a go at this one, pause the video now and give it a shot. If not, we're going to go through the answer just now. So with this one, we've got our traditional Venn diagram style. Yay for the traditionalists out there. I like the funky shapes better. But let's look at what these questions are actually asking us for, basically. So each of these are requiring us to know the total of things going on. Each of these question statements are needing the total, and I get that just by scanning what's being asked. So it's going to be worthwhile and worth just taking a few moments to figure out the total for each of these different Venns. And here's one I prepared earlier and all the totals right here. So you're probably asking about that X that's going on there. Remember, X just means a value that we don't know, but that X has to be equal so that we can add that on to our total. So for beach holidays, it's 12, that's fine and dandy. For city break, it's 13 plus x, and for skiing, it's 11 plus x. So that x is just a number that could be anything from 1 to whatever, and we're going to not know what it is, but we know how it could alter how we compare our answers to each other. So let's again start with the statement that has the fewest comparisons needed. And I think with that one, it's C, because that's a pretty good one that we know is just wrong. It's not 8 plus x, it's 12. And we don't know what x means, so we don't even know if 8 plus x does equal 12. So we can immediately rule out C, because that one's not going to be true. So let's again just go with what one sort of looks nicest first. So we're again going to compare two variables and go by convention of the alphabet. So just start with A. So more people went on a city break than went skiing. Well, we know that a city break is 13 plus x, skiing is 11 plus x. So it doesn't actually matter what that x is because it's in both of them. So if the x was 5, they're both going to be 5 bigger. If the x was 2, they're both going to be 2 bigger. So either way, we know that that is actually true, that more people did go on a city break than went skiing. So we're going to bank on A being our correct answer for now, but we're just going to go through for fullness and check the others. You wouldn't do this in the exam unless you didn't want extra time on the other questions, which would be very odd. We were just doing this now to sort of show Venn diagram theory. So for answer option B, fewer people went skiing than on a beach holiday. So we're comparing that 11 plus x total to that 12 total. We have no idea what that x means. We know it must mean 1, we're guessing, but that would be equal, so we don't know anything about fewer or more, so we can't make any sort of conclusion on B there. On answer option D, we're comparing the city break to beach holiday. Comparing those together, we've got 13 plus x to 12. So again, it doesn't actually matter what that x is, because already we're higher just with that 13, and x is only going to boost us up more. So we can also say that this one is not true. It's not the same number. It's going to be more for the city break. So we can also rule out D, which leaves us with A, of course. So jotting down the totals at the beginning of the question, you may instantly feel wrong with doing that because you're taking time that you may not need, but it makes answering the questions so much quicker. If I was trying to total them along, I would have forgotten what number I had just added up by the time I started adding up the next one. It's worthwhile just taking those few seconds to jot down those totals on your scratch pad or your whiteboard in order to make the question as easy as possible. So here's one final question for you to have a go of. Again, if you'd like to take a shot yourself, pause the video now. And if not, we're going to go over the answer in just a moment. So with this one, again, scanning the text, I see that we've got some totals going on. I'm just going to take a few moments to figure out what's actually going on with those totals. I can also see in some of the questions I'm asked for an overall total. So while I'm adding, I'm just going to add up everything as I go. Note this down on my scratch pad. Remember, we'd be using shorthand, so I just write S equals 10, H equals 3, L equals 14. I don't know how to spell management at the best of times, nevertheless, in a time pressure decision making section. So M equals 6 is absolutely fine. Brilliant, so let's just start going through our statements. And again, pick the one that's easiest for us to determine. So that's one that only refers to one of those categories. So we've got BC going on there. There are 5 employees on a sale role. Don't know who's chatting that, but it's wrong. There are 10 people in a sales role. So we can absolutely rule that one out immediately. Next easiest one is probably D. The most common is sales. Again, just a brief comparison of that 10 to 15 shows that again it's not true, that sales is not the most popular. We can see that legal is actually going to be the most popular. So no, get rid of sales as well. So going on to option B now, because again it seems like a pretty easy one for us to determine. So we've got a random employee. There's a 12% chance that they work in HR. So that's fundamentally asking, do the HR employees make up 12% of this group? So we've got the 3 people over 25, 3 over 25. If I just multiply that up by 4 on both the numerator and the denominator, I'm going to get to 12 over 100, 12%. So grand, we've got B as our answer. I'm just going to bank that one and move on to the next question, as we're pretty confident that that's true at this point. So today we're just going to go over what we've covered in this tutorial. So we've covered the basics of approaching Venn questions. And then we've also went over how to approach the most common question type, which is this one just here if you missed that. And then we've also learned Medic Mind's a sort of foolproof technique for handling Venn diagram questions. So in order to consolidate this technique and all the knowledge you've gained, make sure to practice Venn diagram questions. And equally, if you get stuck on something, don't be scared to reach out for help. There'll always be someone there that can point you in the right direction. So well done on getting through another tutorial, and I look forward to seeing you again soon.